blah, blah, blah.
Feta. Just call him Feta.
Hello and welcome to the Hackaday podcast. I'm Elliot Williams.
And I'm Kristina Panos.
This is episode 229. We'll be talking DIY VR, gutting voice assistants, and ChatGPT failing its summer internship. Last week was the end of the call for participation for the Hackaday SuperCon coming up in November, and a few people wrote in and asked us if it was too late to submit their proposals. And the answer was yes, it is too late. But they asked so nicely, so we've extended the call for participation for one more week. Head on over to Hackaday, find the article, I'll throw a link in the show notes, and fill out the forms that you will find linked there to submit a talk proposal. I guess we extended the deadline until August 1st, so if you're listening to this on Friday when the podcast goes live, you've got the weekend. But you could put together a talk proposal in a couple minutes, right?
Sure.
In other more general hacker news, there is a serious vulnerability in European trunked radio system. This is the Tetra system that a lot of police use, and these systems are sold throughout the world. The lowest quality encryption in them turns out that it's lower quality than we thought. It's TEA1, which is Tetra Encryption Algorithm 1, has a 32-bit fallback, and it turns out that makes the radio communications brute forceable and no longer secure. This means that communications that police forces thought were secure won't be, and that's not good news. But it's one of those reasons why you should open source everything. This would have been picked up in a minute if it didn't take people 12 years to reverse engineer the protocol. And speaking of crazy reverse engineering, Van Moof e-bike bankruptcy, the risks of cloud-connected transport. The Van Moof is a particularly sweet-looking e-bike. They actually put the batteries in the bike tubes, so it looks like a regular bike. But one of the features it had was a custom gear shifting profile that you could set on your cell phone, and it needed a cell phone app that had to talk to their server. And now that they are going bankrupt, you can't change your gear profiles anymore on the bike. Or can you? Because a bunch of people have worked on reverse engineering it already. And in fact, a rival smart bike company, Cowboy Bikes, has pushed out an alternate app for this. So the good news is, even though you shouldn't have gotten a bike with the cloud tethered functionality, people have hacked it and saved your bacon anyway.
This is a journey into sound.
What's that sound?
What's that sound?
And that brings us to What's That Sound? You want to have a listen this week?
Oh, here we go. Sounds like a...
It is.
Hooray.
There's no chance you'll guess which one it is, though.
Which one? Well, it's not...
Correct. Oh, man. Well, I don't know if I'm going to request it, but that's exactly what it is. It's a particular one. I guess it'd be really cool if a couple people could tell us which particular one it is, but we'll see what comes in. Anyway, if you listeners out there think you know what that sound was, then head on over to hackaday.com/podcast, fill out the form with your handle and your best guess, and next week we'll see who got it right and who got it rightest, and we will divvy out a Hackaday podcast t-shirt accordingly.
I finally got one.
Woohoo!
It's been a while.
All right, well, without further ado, let's head off to the hacks. I want to start this week with a really sweet little hack. RFID emulator plus e-paper badge can be programmed with sound. It's, a business card sized badge. I guess it's a 3.5-inch e-paper screen. And on the back of it, it's got a microcontroller, a battery, and an RFID transmitter tag. And so what this means is basically it's a reprogrammable RFID tag with a nice display on the front. So, if you had some event or if you want to issue temporary RFID tags to somebody or anything, you could just program these things and give them out, and they look really sweet. It just looks like a really fun project. The thing that I thought was coolest about this, though, is how you program it, and that is using Georgy Gerganov's GG wave, which is his own kind of data to sound protocol. And so you can program the screen on your cell phone, and then you press go, and your cell phone goes bleep, bloop, bleep, bloop, bleep, and a speaker on the device hears the bleep bloops, and that is the data that then is going to display on the screen and configure the NFC tag with. And I just love this particular implementation, and I've actually written about it before. I'll put the links in the show notes. This is GG Wave Sings the Songs of Your Data, because Georgy has this ported to every microcontroller you can think of. And this one's using an ESP32, but it works on, I mean, literally like everything. Go check out his GitHub if you want to see. And it's a really sweet little protocol. It actually breaks up the data into 4-bit chunks and then plays them as differences in tone from a bass frequency. So in that sense, you can think of it as being frequency shift keying. But it does that on alternating bass frequencies as it goes up. So it has this really R2D2E sound to it that's really cool, and also serves as the framing. The receiving device can tell when the data starts because it's based on the lowest note in this, whatever it is, frequency range. Anyway, it's a really sweet little system, easy to implement on microcontrollers. I think in the comments to that one, Bob Cogasol pointed out that this is actually multi-frequency shift keying. So I'll throw a link for that in the show notes too. This was the first time I'd ever seen this particular scheme used, and especially the multi-frequency aspect used for the framing. But it may be more common than I think, at least. Plus, it's always sweet to get a comment from Bob, who is the guy who brought us sudo, your favorite Linux command.
Well, I think my first hack is pretty sweet too.
It is pretty sweet.
For my first hack this week, I chose MX Jack Nelson's cyberdeck contest entry. Crossberry Pi loves lo-fi hip-hop. So this is kind of what it sounds like. It's a Raspberry Pi inside of one of those Crosley record players. And I have one of these. I think it's a great use for one of these things. I was considering the very same thing. I even gutted it.
Really?
But yeah. But it's so tall, I just feel like it would just, I don't know, no matter where I put the keyboard, the edge would cut into my wrist. I don't know. It just... And I could maybe work with that problem, but then I couldn't close it. I don't know. Put a pool noodle on the edge or something.
Right on.
As one commenter points out, portable music was at one point a totally awesome new thing, no matter what the sound was like. And I would point out that it's 2023, and surely we can make them sound a little better than they do. But what do I know? So, like I said, there's a Raspberry Pi in there. There's also a 10.1-inch portable monitor, a very awesomely deconstructed trackball mouse, and a Planck ortholinear keyboard. I think this looks great. The guts, especially the guts, displayed under clear acrylic, and that's what the keyboard sits on.
Ah,
Yeah.
that explains it. I thought it was just like floating in there, like wedged in. No, okay, good. Was it any good as a record player before? Like, how would you end up wrecking a portable record player?
I don't know. Swinging it around or something.
I mean, you have one. Is it any good?
No, that's why I started gutting it.
Fair enough. Does it play full-size record?
Yeah.
I'm having
Yeah.
trouble understanding the scale of this thing then.
Well, not 16s, but... Well, the 33s crept over the edge a little bit.
Ah, okay.
It's like probably a foot, maybe 14 inches square, mine. 14 inches by 5-6 inches.
Oh, okay. So that's pretty solid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like the old suitcase. I used to have a suitcase Magnavox
Right.
loadable record player, and that didn't sound good either, but I used it anyway. I think it needed a needle. I think it had its original needle from 1963 or something
Right.
still in it.
That could be part of the problem. Yeah, so basically what's left out of this is the not very good speakers and that beautiful, fantastic vinyl covered case with the like creamy volume knobs and stuff.
Yes.
Fair enough. Boom, cyberdeck.
By the way, you have until Tuesday, August 15th at 9 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time to get your entry into the cyberdeck contest.
Thanks for plugging it.
But sooner than that is Gearing Up, which ends on my birthday.
August 8th.
Yes.
Happy upcoming birthday.
Thank you.
And y'all get hacking.
Yes. Oh, you're going to leave that in there? People are going to dox me. Don't dox me. Thank you.
Given what happened to Dan, somebody's going to send you a box with wheat thins in it or whatever that was.
I'd be fine with that, just not that sandwich spread.
Ugh.
I don't think I'd even give that to a food pantry.
No, it's okay. You can throw that away. My next hack is a twofer of rooted and or gutted home assistant devices. First up, I wanted to start with Justin Alvey's Google Nest Mini, gutted and rebuilt to run custom agents. And gutted is kind of an understatement here. I mean, the nice thing about the Google Nest is it's kind of modularly designed on the inside. And so it's got a little daughter board with the microphones on it and a daughter board with the lights on it and a board with the brains on it. And he just took the brain board out and designed his own that uses an ESP32 and then connected that up so that it was able to use the LEDs, the mute switch, the capacitive touch features, and the microphones. So that's pretty cool. It's a complete, brain transplant of the Google Nest Mini, but I think that's kind of fun. He then has the ESP32 talk to GPT 3.5. He uses 3.5 for the speed. And then this in turn talks to a Python program called Maubot, which has access to his Matrix connections. And so he can use it to get in touch with all of his social media things. And this is actually really cool. He has a video of it, which is a very natural looking interaction where he's kind of like, hey, do I have any new messages? And it just kind of reads them off to him. It looks remarkably pleasant to use. And that's all kind of courtesy of GPT 3.5, basically. There's a lot of delay in it, sending it off and stuff like that. But, it's pretty good for something that he kind of cobbled together on his own using a bunch of different services. So I really like that. What else is there to say here? I think it's kind of cool that the Nest is so modular that you can gut it and put in your own brain board. And Justin has promised that he will post up the code for this pretty soon, so keep your eyes out. This was a Twitter-only teaser and video, but boy, count us teased. We are looking for the software as it comes out.
That's not what I would have expected from the guts to be that modular. That's crazy.
It's little board and some flat flex and little board and some flat flex. Pretty hacker-friendly even, almost. The next personal assistant hack is root on an Amazon Echo Dot, and this takes the second generation one and doesn't do any motherboard replacements, but gets root nonetheless on the computer that's running inside. And it turns out, of course, it's a Linux, and if you can load up a patched kernel, you can then get root on it yourself. But it has a bootloader that prevents you from loading a patched kernel, so you have to get rid of this bootloader. Daniel uses the Kamakiri boot ROM exploit, which messes up the signature, so the bootloader goes looking for a new preloader. He can then push that across on USB, throw in his custom preloader, it loads the custom bootloader, then wants to load his Linux image, and then he is king of the castle. I guess Daniel wrote this from a kind of security perspective where he's worried about people compromising these old Echo second generation Echo Dots. And so he's kind of worried about remote exploits and stuff like that, and is disappointed to find that you have to do it locally by plugging in a USB cable. On the other hand, as someone who would want to play around with one of these things, I think that's awesome. And so, it's a total win for the good hackers and, evidence that these things were designed well enough that they're secure against the bad hackers. So, yippee. That's the kind of thing I like to see. Sorry, Daniel, you didn't get a bug bounty for it. But really cool. Thanks for publishing your work. Anyway, so if you're into hacking on home automation hockey pucks, this week we got 2 of them for you.
For my next hack, I chose em&gt Lam's Solenoid Keyboard. Sounds very much like a typewriter. Boy, yes it does. As someone who uses a typewriter regularly, I will agree that it sounds like a typewriter. Now, if anyone is going to dox me and looking for birthday presents to send me, I would take one of these red herring keyboards. It's very cool looking, and unfortunately there are not a lot of build details here, but we do know that the switches are silent alpacas from Durock. Now, let me just stop you here and say that the idea of a super clacky, sometimes keyboard with linear nothing switches is a little weird to me. Like to the point I think it would take getting used to. Now I know you can turn the solenoid on and off. Oh, right, which I have failed to mention so far that it does have a single solenoid for super clack mode, but the normal mode is silent. It sounds great though. Check out the video.
That is crazy.
Let's watch the video again.
Yeah, I just did. I don't know if you could hear it bleeding through my earphones, but it was like clack, 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 clack.
Plus there's a giant knob.
Yeah, right? That is pretty funny. Do you think the noise is just it throwing that solenoid back and forth? Probably, huh? It doesn't look like it's hitting up on anything. No, I think it's just... I bet you can feel that, though. I bet it gives you some tactile feedback, too. That could actually be really fun.
I hope it does. I hope so.
You could make one with even more click to it that like shakes the whole table every time you press a button or something. I think somebody needs to
put rumble packs in it.
Yeah, push this to its logical extreme here. I don't think we've gone far enough. Or maybe electric shocks, small electric shocks, so you know when you've pressed the key, right?
Yes, there's a key. We've covered a keyboard like that.
Have we? I should have known.
Let me put that in the thingy. Electric shock. I really like the arrangement of the diodes. I assume those are the diodes up top.
Oh, I was wondering what that was. I thought it was like some kind of meant to look like,
Maybe
like
not.
you're looking down on a typewriter, like the little striky, flappy things on a typewriter. The type, it must be called on a typewriter. But, maybe you're right. Maybe those are. Zoom, enhance.
I don't know, that second photo on the GitHub kind of looks diode-y to me.
All right, well, that's madness. I don't know what's been going on, but we've been seeing a bunch of VR headset builds lately, and I think it might be because one of our writers, Donald Papp, loves them. Anyway, thanks, Donald, because this week brought us Charlie Pyatt's beautifully rebuilding a VR headset to add AR, augmented reality features. And this is the 10th video in a series of Charlie's rebuilding an Oculus 2 headset and adding a stereo camera to the front of it so that he can then do augmented reality features as well. And like his demo at the very end of this last video is him with a, I don't know what, arm gauntlet commander thing projected onto his arm that he can press the buttons on and interact with. And then
that thing is so cool.
It is so cool. And this is the 10th video in a series, and it's the one you want to watch because it kind of summarizes all of the steps along the way here. And this is just an absolutely phenomenally polished project. I mean, one of the things that just blew my mind was he wrote some software to take a face scan of his own face and make a custom mask for it. So the part where it would normally be like a rubbery or foamy face gasket is actually 3D printed, but exactly to custom fit to his face. And I love that. He even ends up making his own like tightener headband thing at the back. You really should see that. That actually took up a whole episode. It's just a beautiful design, and it uses 3D printed parts and paracord to its best advantage. Along the way, of course, there are a lot of cardboard prototypes, because you got to get this stuff right. And especially since he's using a lot of 3D printed parts, but also some carbon fiber to keep this thing light, you kind of want to get it done right on the first try. And so there's a lot of cardboard prototyping going along the way. What's really cool about this kind of overview video is you can then go back and figure out which of the previous ones are most interesting to you and check them out. I did that with the face scan one, actually with a couple others, and it's well worth your time. Really, really cool. Even if you don't want to build a VR headset, VR/AR headset. But man, if you're into that scene, especially the DIY side of that scene, this is very inspirational. Do you have an AR/VR rig?
I don't. What do I do about the fact that I need glasses?
Good question. I think a lot of them have little like diopter inserts. You can get,
That's the word.
basically built-in glasses built in.
Nice.
So no worry.
I want to try it. I did VR at the mall in the 90s, but I haven't done anything since then.
Oh my God, that will not cut it. You should definitely try some of the kind of more modern variety. But I've never done any of this really kind of serious modern generation AR stuff. So that's kind of fun too. Anyway, if you just can't get enough prototypey VR headsets, we've got two good articles for you. I'll throw the links in the show notes. One is very recent. It's the gallery of Sony's PSVR2 prototypes, where Sony shows everything they did to make these things work. And, this ranges from, basically a huge motherboard strapped on top of somebody's head to kind of eventual refinements. It's really kind of fun to see like what they went through. Also, an article from last year, VR prototypes reveal Facebook's surprisingly critical research directions. And this one's neat. Shows you a bunch of the design decisions that went into Facebook/Meta's most recent VR headset.
For my last hack this week, I chose Tom G's Gameboy-style camera for Playdate. If you're unfamiliar, the Playdate is that bright yellow console that came out last year. It's got a crank on the side that does not in fact charge the battery, but it is involved in many of the games that you can play on the thing. Tom used an OV7670 camera module, ran that through a Teensy, and then that goes into the Playdate via USB. There's a very, very cool utile attachment method here. Magnets let you use it regular camera style, and then you can flip it around and use it selfie style. Or you can use it as a cover for the screen. Although the screen never goes off, it turns into a clock, as is my understanding. I want one. I've gotten back into photography a little bit. I got one of those instant cameras. It takes the little tiny photos, and they're kind of low quality. And I'm into low quality photography.
I actually saw somebody a couple days ago with a Polaroid looking digital camera. Like, I think they were, it looks like one of those old Polaroids, and it would spit out instant images. But I think it just had a printer inside it. I don't know. I should have gone up and hassled them, but
I think I want to make a Pi camera that prints out of a little thermal printer.
Yeah, totally.
I actually have a cute little thermal printer I might be able to use with it. I don't know how lightweight they are these days. They're small.
One of my secret shames is that I bought a Game Boy camera with the intention of hacking it on eBay because they were like $15. So I had to do it, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. So boo to me. But we've seen tons of Game Boy camera hacks on Hackaday, so I figure I could pull it off. My first quick hack this week comes from Inazuma Denki, turning a quartz clock module into a time reference. This is sweet. It takes one of those quartz analog clocks that use an electromagnet to make the second hand sweep, and it reads the pulses that would get sent out to the electromagnet. And the key here is the really sweet analog design. His first one kind of uses the diode voltage versus transistor voltage, and it's a little sketchy. He describes it as more like gambling than engineering. And his second design looks rock solid, and that's the one you should implement if you want to do this. But it's just a fun idea to take a cheap quartz clock and turn it into an accurate timekeeping device to use with your microcontroller projects. Next up, Suno's text-to-speech module can do background music, noises, and sound effects. This one's called Bark, and it lets the simulated speaker laugh and have noise in the background and stuff like that. It still sounds weird like all of these text-to-speech modules do. They all have this kind of weird high-frequency hash in them. If anyone knows what's causing that, let me know, and or fix it and make yourself millions of dollars. Next up, Clay mapping the depths with an autonomous solar boat. This is a fan boat and it's got a sonar depth finder on it. What I thought was really neat here is that it doesn't use ArduPilot or something obvious like that, but all the nav code is written from scratch. So it reads the GPS and gets itself where it needs to go. That's just a fun build and very nicely done. You'll learn something from it. And last up, Aufschlef, Where Old Files Go to Die, is a graveyard for those files that have so much sentimental value that you want to memorialize them, but you just can't keep schlepping them around with you. You can upload them to his website. He creates a 4x5 image from them and memorializes them forevermore. That email from a previous lover that you can't bear to keep around anymore, but you don't want to forget. Upload it.
What if I have a whole bunch of them?
So I was talking with Ulf. I think he'll take them. This is actually a fairly old project, and he was stoked to see that a bunch of people started pushing files up to his server after 10 years after we wrote it up on Hackaday.
Nice. For my first quick hack, I chose Alan Wilson's Selectric Typewriter goes from trash can to Linux terminal. I'm going to accidentally say Linux because I said Linux for a long time because I'm like... Linux.
Hello, this is Linus Torvalds, and I pronounce Linux as Linux.
Okay, back to the recording. So this is pretty much what it says on the tin. Alan Wilson turned a dumpster Dovin IBM Selectric typewriter into a Linux terminal. Oh my goodness, the fixes that Alan Wilson did in the beginning of the video and the explanation of how everything works is just great. And then to make it into a terminal on top of that is just amazing to me. And I really want a Selectric now. I actually have a Selectric 1, but the on-off rocker switch just like comes off in your hand. And I'm not sure how it connected to the mechanism because it's kind of it's like really not obvious how it moves. Not obvious to me anyway. If I could turn it into something like this, that would be amazing. I just love to watch them go. And to be able to type and then watch it and then have it play or piano your stuff back to you.
For sure.
That's amazing.
Oh, we need to get him to load up the retro edition of Hackaday on this.
Oh, yeah. Next up is Kilo Bravo 9 Echo November Sierras. That ultra white paint that helps cool surfaces. Make your own. If you're unaware, there's ultra white paint out there that reflects heat and sends it to space. And it actually makes whatever's painted cooler to the touch. Not cool to the touch, but cooler to the touch. So KB9 made their own by adding commonly available, who knew that this is commonly available, barium sulfate from a pottery shop and mixed that into white acrylic base paint, finding eventually that a 60% concentration by volume worked the best. Painted the battery section of a solar recharger, and they know that in full sunlight, before they painted it, it became too hot to touch, but now that it was painted, it's merely warm. Merely warm. And lastly but not leastly, we have Vlado Vince's restoring the cheapest TRS-80 at the swap meet. Boy, it's hard not to say trash 80.
You can if you want.
Okay, I had one for a while.
Yeah.
I don't know why I got rid of it. I had a Wang, I had a trash 80.
Oh my god.
I had some other stuff. My parents' basement. Vintage computers are skyrocketing in price these days, and somehow Vlado found a functional trash 80 at the VCF swap meet. Actually, one of the VCFs that we covered.
Yeah, that Tom was at. Yeah.
Tom has a picture of it before it was purchased, before it went under considerable repairs. For something being sold as functional, Vlado had to do a lot of repairs. But that's awesome though, because it really makes it yours. Like when I fixed my little electronic typewriter, well, all I really did was open it and replace like all the electrolytic capacitors, but I fixed it. See? And I got to see the smoke monster come out before that. But anyway, Vlado had to do all sorts of things like replace corroded ICs, removed a weird bodged memory upgrade, repair a bunch of traces that got cut and rerouted for unknown reasons, and also had to fix the keyboard connector. But then the video still wasn't working, and Vlado discovered that the chip that they replaced was wrong, and they needed yet a third type of chip altogether. So not the one that was in there, not the one they changed it to, but a third one. And then it worked.
Fully functional.
And Bob was Vlado's uncle, and yes. And the computing continued.
Yoo-hoo! Alright, that brings us to our camp mishacks. These are long-form pieces written by our fantastic Hackaday writing staff. And this week I wanted to pick Dan Maloney's experience, ChatGPT, the worst summer intern ever. And this is fun because Dan, first of all, he needed a part and he needed a 3D design done. And he thought, I could whip this up in Fusion 360 easy enough. It's a simple latch for his chicken coop. He basically, as he puts it in the article, attempts to deal with the cruel equation, 11 chickens plus 1 raccoon equals 8 chickens.
Oh.
So he needs a latch to keep the raccoon from lifting up the chicken coop door without him. And he doesn't want to design it the way he knows how to design it in Fusion 360. Instead, he thinks he's going to design it using OpenSCAD. But he doesn't know any OpenSCAD. So what do you do? The answer is you Google OpenSCAD and you follow the fantastically pleasant tutorial. You learn it. You're good enough to make this sort of thing in about an hour and a half. Sorry. The answer is you go over to ChatGPT and you ask it to design the part for you. And this is where his problem started because he got something that actually, honestly, looking at it, looks pretty darn plausible. But Dan says through syntax errors. And because he doesn't know OpenSCAD, it was hard for him to debug the syntax errors. I honestly still can't see where they are. I trust him. He hit a brick wall. He didn't know how to tell ChatGPT to improve the design. He told it had a syntax error in line 21, but it couldn't fix it for him. So he kind of just got stuck there, and that was the end of the experience. I mean, we've seen other people do OpenSCAD modeling with ChatGPT, and they've gotten kind of more or less successful. I'll have to find the link for that one, but there was one where someone designed an airplane with it, and, they do kind of get a plank for a wing and a tube for a body. I mean, it wouldn't fly, but it kind of vaguely looks like an airplane. So that counts as a success, right? Anyway, Dan took this code that didn't work from ChatGPT and then started learning OpenSCAD himself. And within an hour or two, he managed to get a working part out of this and printed it out, and his chickens are now safe. But that leaves him with the question, what should he take away from this? And his takeaway lesson is that ChatGPT was, quote, behaving like an earnest and eager to please but somewhat clueless summer intern. It went off, it tried to give him a result, maybe checked Stack Exchange, came up with an answer that it thought it could do the job, but it didn't even test it out by running it through OpenSCAD to see if it would work, which Dan says would be grounds for an intern for a stern talking to. But he can't do the same with ChatGPT because, the best he can do is say, you've got a syntax error here. And it's like, I'm sorry, here's another syntax error. So, haha. In the end, he ends up spending the 2 hours to learn rudimentary OpenSCAD like he probably should have done in the first place. And that's kind of my takeaway from this, and one of those things that I don't understand about people's obsession with ChatGPT yet. Most of the time, it's better than nothing. And I think that's really cool, actually. I mean, I do think it's cool that you could say, give me some OpenSCAD code and I need a hole here and another hole here. And it gives you something that's, kind of plausibly a bunch of shapes. That's really cool, significantly better than nothing. But what we have now isn't nothing. Like the comparison, the status quo isn't that we have nothing. In fact, the status quo is if you Google OpenSCAD tutorial, you'll be off to the races pretty damn quick. That's where I'm always at a loss here. When people are like, oh, it wrote this letter for me. I'm like, yeah, but did you try Googling rejection letter? Like, there's a million rejection letters you could have just plagiarized straight on the internet. In fact, that's how it knows how to write a rejection letter, is that it's read and absorbed every rejection letter posted on the internet. So I just don't know what to think about it. And my own personal experiences run along the ways of Dan's as well, which is that you can get really good stuff out of it by iterating and saying, fix this part and fix that part. But if you're looking for something particular, you're looking for something factual, or you're looking for something, that has a verifiable right or wrong to it, like an OpenSCAD code, sometimes it's the worst summer intern ever. And while it is impressive that it does what it does at all, I'm not sure it's better than the alternative, which is just to teach yourself the thing that you want it to do for you. That said, a friend of mine who is working as a PR person, she loves it because it writes awesome, kind of boring but appropriate sounding PR text. So if that's your gig, man, it's your thing.
Or if that was your gig, we're sorry.
Yeah, if that's your gig, look for another line of work. Ouch.
Well, I hate to be that guy, but is it possible that Dan learned at least a little bit from looking at the code generated by ChatGPT? I mean, I'm not saying he's never seen OpenSCAD code before, but...
No, I think he absolutely did.
Okay.
And I think you're right. I think he came into it having never seen OpenSCAD code before, and he walked away from it having seen a non-functioning example and having made it work himself, by which he learned it. Like, yeah, right? Like, it got his foot in the door for him in a way, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. No, so that's totally legit. And again, better than nothing.
He even says, the original code may have been crap, but at least it gave me the impression that OpenSCAD programming wasn't entirely foreign territory for me.
That's totally right, though. But I claim that Dan is a grown person and can Google for information himself. And if he hadn't wanted to use ChatGPT to do this, just because it's fun to try it out, right? If he hadn't needed to do that, then he would have been better served by just Googling around for the first OpenSCAD tutorial he found. But still, it is true that what happened here is that he used it and it gave him something half plausible and he improved on it from there. It totally did, get him that foot in the door.
For my long-form article, I chose Al Williams's Ask Hackaday, What's Linux Anyway? Now, I might get downvoted to heck for this, but I say, good question. I always thought it was clear, but what do I know? I will say that it's never been my daily driver. I've used it, I've programmed in Unix, but I wouldn't consider myself well-versed in any flavor. But it's not a stranger to me. I would say that I agree with both Al's take and the README. And the README states, Linux is a clone of the operating system Unix written from scratch by apparently Linus Torvalds with assistance from a loosely knit team of hackers across the net. A clone of. So my take, in agreeing with both Al and this, essentially is that it is a kernel. It's an offshoot of Unix. But Al goes on to say, what defines a system? Is it simply the kernel? Is it a set of one true utilities? What counts and what doesn't? And I might get flack for my take and I don't care, but I believe that it's the kernel plus the things that make the kernel usable, because that's what makes sense to me. And maybe that looks like Arch, maybe it looks like KDE, maybe it looks like something crazier, but I think that they're both Linux. But I am curious, I want to know what you think. That's mostly why I chose this one.
I think you're probably right, though. The main point here is that the biggest Linux operating system out there is probably Chrome OS, which does use Linux, but it's not totally as Linuxy as the Linux distributions that we're all thinking of. It's based on a bunch of these, but it's also kind of, spun off into its own thing by having all these other tools with it and stuff, like you suggested. And so it's not as Linuxy as most of the distributions we think of. And then there's Android, which is also a Linux kernel, but it's totally not Linux. Like it forces you to use Java to program in it instead of C. It's all wrong.
Oh.
So I don't know, but I don't know where to draw the line either. And it's really fun. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not too worried about it either, but
yeah, you don't have to worry, you're not a court of law. You don't have to worry about these things.
Exactly. And it's all based on, free enough software that nobody has to care even. So it's kind of cool that way.
It makes for a good Ask Hackaday, though.
It does. It really does. And I think it's cool. I think it's amazing that Chrome OS has kind of a bigger desktop Linux share than all the rest of the desktop Linuxes combined. That's really... How's that possible? Does this count Red Hat? I mean, because Red Hat Enterprise is like, I don't know. Maybe I don't know if I believe these numbers anyway. But still, it's kind of fun to think of Chrome OS being the biggest Linux distribution out there. So, I don't know, is the short answer. I don't know, but it's really, like you say, it gets blurry, right? How much, it's the kernel plus all the other stuff, and how much of the other stuff needs to be the same or different before you stop calling it Linux anymore. And I think that's kind of the point with Chrome OS, is it's really in that gray zone, whereas I would probably say Android isn't Linux because the rest of the operating environment is so foreign to me, a Linux person.
I really want to program in Unix again. It's fun.
Yeah, you should.
Just make like poems or something.
Give Jenny's article next week a read and see if she can fool you into running FreeBSD.
Okay.
You could be hipsterier than all the rest of us suckers in like one fell swoop.
Well, I do have the Instax camera.
Exactly. All right, that wraps it up for this week's Hackaday podcast. Thanks very much for listening. If you want to follow along with the links, head on over to hackaday.com/podcast. And as always, if you see anything cool or do anything cool, drop us a line, tips@hackaday.com. And until next week,
Keep on hacking.
what am I talking about?
For my first hack, I chose, how are we going to say this? 38.8 repeating degrees outside. I had my air on. It's only 79 in here. I have an ice pack. I'm doing good.
Oh, what the hell is it called? Ooh, I don't know.
Oh, sure. No, that's fine.
I'm not super hurt that you call it a Trash 80.
Mine was a Model 2. I should have looked this up.
What the heck?
Boom.
Boom. I think that's a wrap.
So, yeah. Whoa. Bye-bye.